Hey guys, we are in peak tomato season right now, and I need to make some tomato sauce before all these tomatoes go bad. So today I want to take you along with me as I make tomato sauce, talk about how I do it and how I've made it easier for myself over the years, and hopefully give you some ideas of what to do if you have a massive tomato harvest this year. Right now I have a ton of tomatoes in my fridge. I pick them, I let them sit on the counter until they fully ripen, and then after that, I put them in the fridge to wait until I have a big enough batch to make sauce from. The size of the batch that you can make will kind of rely on the size of the pot that you have available, or if you want to use multiple pots, the size of basically just cooking area that you have available, because you will need to simmer all of this for a very long time. Before I get started though, I'm going to take my basket outside and pick any more tomatoes that are currently ripe enough to be used in the sauce. If this is your first time seeing my garden, welcome. I am in upstate South Carolina. It is the middle of July, and this is my tomato row. So most of the time I would come through and pick all the tomatoes that are blushing, just because I've been having troubles with tomatoes splitting and some pests. But today I'm just going to come through and pick all of the ones that are kind of, quote, perfectly ripe. I think we can see this one right here. I'm also only pulling my paste tomatoes. I do have a variety that is specifically good for sun drying, so I'm going to leave those out, and I've just got my basket of ripe paste tomatoes. Alright, so before we get into it, I want to give you kind of an overview of the process so that if you are watching this video and thinking about how you're going to do it yourself at home, you have a really good idea of what you're about to get yourself into. So I think this process, all the way from starting right now to having actual water bath canned jars of tomato sauce, probably take me 5 or 6 hours. Most of that is not active time. This part here at the beginning, and then there's a part in the middle where you've got the most stuff to do. The basic process is you're gonna cut up your tomatoes, you're gonna get the cores out, cut off any bad bits, you're gonna throw them into your giant pot and kind of simmer them on the stove until they get all mushy and release a lot of water. And at that point, you're going to put them through a food mill. I used to do this with a hand crank food mill, but I've got one to attach to my KitchenAid now. So you put it all through the food mill, and that gets out the skins and the seeds. And then you have a very watery sauce left over. And from then, it's just reducing until you have the consistency of tomato sauce that you want. And once you've got down to the consistency you want, then you're going to go ahead and put it in your jars and water bath can it. This is the pot that I use for water bath canning. It's just a cheapo stock pot. I think I bought it at Walmart many years ago. And I'm going to start my big batch of tomatoes in this because it's the biggest pot I have. And then after I have run it through the food mill, I will split it into 2 smaller pots to simmer so that I can wash this and get it prepped for water bath canning later. I am also adding an extra step in here, which is something that is absolutely not necessary, but I'm going to weigh my tomatoes before I put them into my big pot, just so that I can know from beginning to end, like weight that I started with equals how much weight of sauce. And that's just something I'm doing to get a better idea for myself of what to expect from this process. I also want to tell you guys that I learned this process the same way that you are right now. I learned it via YouTube. I did a bunch of searching. I watched a lot of tutorials. I found one in particular that I felt like was what I was going for. I'll link it below. It's this old Italian man showing his process of doing like an even bigger batch than I am, like 4 or 5 times as much as I am. And I think he's doing it in the traditional Italian way, and I find that to be really trustworthy and also charming. So I recommend you go watch his video anyway, just because it's so fun to watch. But I do want to let you know that that is where I learned how to do this. And I recognize that like multiple people teaching the same thing is really useful because different people learn in different ways. And I hope that you can get something out of the way that I teach this process. Fresh ones down, all the rest of the fridge ones to go. This has been simmering for about 30 or 45 minutes. I've been stirring it quite a bit. I have not added any extra liquid. This is all stuff that was squished out of the tomatoes. And looking at it, I'd say you could use a little bit more time. You can still find like whole tomatoes in here, and I'm looking for it to be just a little bit more mashed up than this. This is 30 minutes later. And this is about what I'm looking for. At this point, I'm going to let it cool off a little bit and then run it through the food mill. I now have 2 pots of liquid. This one's simmering because I got it out first and went ahead and set it on the stove. From here, we are going to reduce by a lot. You can see that this is a very, very wet, very watery sauce. And that's not what we're going for. So I'm gonna check back in with all of this in like an hour. And for my leftover skins and seeds, I am actually going to put these in my vegetable stock freezer bag. If you didn't know, you can save vegetable scraps to make your own veg stock. It's very easy. It's like making vegetable scrap tea. And so over the course of like a few weeks, I'll collect a lot of scraps and just put them in a bag in the freezer so that they're not going bad in the meantime. And when I have a full bag, I boil it in a giant pot of water and make vegetable broth. I've just combined my 2 pots into one, which means I've reduced by about half. And looking at this, it's starting to look more like tomato sauce, but can you see how watery it is still? We are going to continue reducing this until it does a better job sticking to the spoon. This sauce is almost done now. You can see how the bubbles look a lot thicker coming through it. And when I stir it and get some up on the spoon, you can kind of look at how thick it is and how easily it dribbles off. And how thick you want it to be, from here, it's really just personal preference. And also, if you want to make tomato paste, all you have to do is keep reducing this all the way down into a paste. I am going to let my sauce get just a little bit thicker, and in the meantime I'm going to take you guys outside with me to harvest some basil. In addition to the basil, we are going to be putting salt in, and then those are the only two things that are going into the jars with our tomato sauce. We don't actually need a whole lot. I would put about 1 leaf per jar that I'm making. So I'm going to just grab like 1 big bunch of basil here. This is the final consistency of my sauce. I added 3 teaspoons of salt to this whole thing, and I think that that is plenty salty enough for this. And the only step left is to actually can it. I am going to be water bath canning it, and this is not a canning tutorial. I recommend you find that somewhere else, but I am going to put a basil leaf in the jar with the tomato sauce, and then I'm going to can them for probably 25 to 30 minutes. I like to use little jars for tomato sauce because this is the perfect amount of sauce for pizza, which is the #1 thing that I end up using this sauce for. If you are new to canning, I do recommend you getting yourself a copy of the Ball Book of Canning. There are a bunch of tested recipes in here and instructions and basically everything you need to know about canning you can find in this book.